You guys heard of You're Next on the Menu? The story goes like, there was a young woman who started a bed and breakfast. She put a listing on the internet looking for a private chef to hire for the bed and breakfast to make the guests breakfast before they leave. A private chef reached out to her and they set up a time for the chef to come over to the bed and breakfast and make a trial breakfast to see if they would like to hire the chef to make breakfast for the guests. When the chef got there, she was acting a little strange, but they didn't really think anything of it. She wasn't talking much, and when she did talk, she made very strange comments. The bed and breakfast owners gave the chef some privacy to make the breakfast in the kitchen, and when the chef was done, she served them up a plate of food. She served them up a plate of pancakes, but only they weren't real pancakes. The chef had served the young woman a plate of a skinned human face. This is actually the plot of my new YouTube video, so if you want to watch it, just click the link in my bio or type in my YouTube username and subscribe.
Yo, what's up? Here's some scary facts about our world that you probably didn't want to know. Part 44. There is a type of shark species known as the Greenland shark that can live upwards of 200 years. One, because it is adapted to the cold water in the Arctic Ocean, and the second reason is because it'll eat anything that falls in the water. That means polar bears, penguins, and anything up above. If you were to travel to space in a spaceship, traveling the speed of light, let's say at age 15, when you came back 5 years later, you would be 20, but all of your friends, well, they'd be 65. There is a condition known as the Cotard syndrome, otherwise known as the walking corpse syndrome, in which people suffer from believing that they have never existed and that they have been dead this whole time. If you go to a Catholic priest and tell him that you murdered somebody, they can't say a word because of Catholic law, and they will keep your secret. Please don't get any ideas.
This is proof that we aren't alone. Okay, so everybody's freaking out about this creature that washed up on the ocean in Vietnam. Nobody knows what it is, but many people speculate it's a mermaid. So, let me know what you think of it.
This is one of the creepiest, weirdest short films on the internet. It's called Human Form. It's not outright scary, but it does give strong vibes of Uncanny Valley. As you can tell, they don't look like people, they look like mannequins. And the way they look reminds me of The Expressionless. You can't look at it for too long without feeling like you have to look away. If you guys don't know what Uncanny Valley is, you should look it up, or I could make a video on it if you want me to. And this gives extreme Uncanny Valley vibes. You need to do the green ribbon. The green ribbon is another scary story that you guys always ask me to tell. The story goes like, there was a girl named Jenny and a guy named Alfred. They met when they were young and quickly became friends, but Jenny always wore a green ribbon around her neck. Alfred would ask Jenny, "Why are you wearing that green ribbon?" And Jenny would reply, "I can't tell you that right now." Jenny and Alfred grew up and they eventually started dating, fell in love, and got married. After they had gotten married, Alfred asked about the green ribbon again. He said, "Jenny, now that we're married, you have to tell me why you always wear this green ribbon around your neck." And once again, Jenny said, "I can't tell you that right now. You'll have to wait until the time is right. Then I can tell you." Well, the years passed and Jenny and Alfred grew old and Jenny got very sick. When Jenny was on her deathbed, Alfred was by her side and she told him, "You can finally take off the green ribbon." Alfred carefully untied the ribbon from Jenny's neck, and when he took it off, her head came off of her body.
This is the scary story about the maid. There was a man named Steve who was super busy. His house was always a mess and he never had time to clean it. So he hired a maid. The next day before he left for work, the maid was already there ready to clean. When Steve got back home, the house was spotless and the maid was already gone. All of a sudden he smelled a very bad odor and he couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Steve told the maid the next day about the smell and she said she'll take care of it. When Steve got home from work that day, the smell was even worse. He then heard a noise coming from the basement. When he went down the basement stairs, he saw the maid standing in the corner. He then asked her, "What is that smell?" The maid looked at him with a twisted smile and pointed on the ground where she was standing. Right beneath the maid's feet were multiple decomposing dead bodies. Steve then let out a scream and tried to run up the stairs. But before he could get away, the maid stabbed him multiple times in the back. As Steve laid on the staircase bleeding out, the maid got down and whispered in his ear, "You should have never hired me."
Alright, let's talk about the Chupacabra. The story of the Chupacabra originates in Mexico. There are many different reports on how this creature looks. A lot of people say he has spines on his back, razor-sharp teeth, and is about the size of a bear. This beast is known to kill and drink the blood of all livestock on farms. This beast has apparently been spotted in Puerto Rico as well. In 1995, it was reported that 8 sheep were killed and completely drained of blood on a Puerto Rican farm. A lot of people have speculated that this creature actually has wings as well. It's also said this creature is lightning fast. And if you happen to encounter it on an empty stomach, good luck. It's reported this creature will attack humans and drink their blood entirely. It's also less commonly known that this creature can stalk its prey very well. So the next time you're alone and you see an animal in the bushes, think twice. What do you think?
This is the longest true horrifying story episode. This episode is worth the time. The story took place in Nador, Morocco in the year 2015. The story was submitted by Ilyas. Back in 2015, Ilyas was an 18-year-old Moroccan Muslim that lived in Norway. One night, Ilyas was back in Morocco visiting family, and he stayed up late watching a movie at home till 3 in the morning. The living room was very warm, so he got up to open the window for fresh air. As he was at the window, being at the 4th floor in that building, he looks down, and the street was dark and empty, but there was one man wearing black from head to toe with a hood covering his face. He wasn't sure why that man was outside at that time. He looked away, but then peeked one last time out of curiosity. When he looked at him again, the man had his hands on a building's wall. He was strangely just feeling the wall, and out of nowhere, the man vanishes through that wall. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief after what he just witnessed. Ilyas swears that there was no door in that spot. It was just physically impossible. He forgets about this after a while, and then flies back to Norway. 6 months later, in Norway, Ilyas experiences his first ever sleep paralysis, which in Islam is known as Jathum. He vividly remembers having a conversation with a dark figure, and his mom also witnessed him speak in his sleep. He woke up after the paralysis with swollen feet and rashes all over his body. They rushed to the ER, and none of the doctors could diagnose what caused his body to react that way. He was finally discharged after treatment, but after that day, Ilyas was never the same person. He always acted differently. He was antisocial. He was distant from people. And his mom always told him that he needed ruqya. A few months later, they fly back to Morocco for the next holiday season. He was always against his mother's ruqya idea. However, he decided to fight his thoughts and do it. He had a cousin that was also suffering, and she visited a raqi in Morocco quite regularly. So they went together with both of their moms. When they reached, they sat down and waited for their session. Ilyas could hear the raqi in the other room, and he felt extremely uneasy and started to sweat. The Quran recitation, the ruqya, the sounds, made him not even want to look at that direction. He was angry. He went outside for a moment to gain back his senses until their turn finally reached. The raqi called them in and started. Ilyas's cousin immediately started reacting horribly when the Quran started. She was screaming so loud. Ilyas started losing senses throughout his entire body. He was sweating, he was unable to move, and he was shouting from fear. He does pray, and he does read Quran. But he was so confused as to why he was screaming. He felt like he was being tortured. The slightest pinch from the raqi felt like it was a knife stab. It was very powerful. And this is where he felt a jinn's presence inside of him. The following night was the most horrific night for Ilyas. For a whole week, the man was not able to sleep alone, and he would get mentally abused by these demons haunting him. Weeks go by. Ilyas started getting demonic thoughts of harming his own family. He hated everyone. When he would look at his own sister, her face would seem distorted to him. He knows these beings are playing with his head. His whole life turned upside down. He would regularly think of harming his own family, but luckily, he never did. A few months later, Ilyas was back in Norway and life was back to normal. He was relieved that he was in a good state of mind and that the horror was over. At the time, he worked at a local grocery store. After a Christmas celebration at work, which he did not participate in, it was late at night. He was walking one of his colleagues back home from work. She was a young woman and she was scared to walk alone. After they reached outside her place, she asked him, "Where's that other girl that was with us?" "What girl?" Ilyas asked. "There was no one there. It was just you and I." She swore that there was another woman with black hair, pale skin, standing next to him the whole time, staring at Ilyas's colleague with anger. Even though this entity gave Ilyas a break, this jinn was still around, haunting everyone that has intentions towards Ilyas.
This is getting scarily real now. So you may have seen the show The Last of Us and of course the bacterial infection in it which causes everyone to turn into zombies. You probably think, it's zombies. That can never happen. Never. Well, the bacteria cordyceps is actually a real virus in animals. You may have seen my other video on it because what it does to insects is mental. It literally turns them into zombies. Basically what it does is it eats the insect from the inside out like it does in the show. So the creature is still alive but is literally a zombie. Now this is where it gets scary. Now this fungus hasn't actually developed enough yet to be able to live in humans, so for the meantime we're safe. Scientists has recently published an article saying that we are only 3 stages away from this actually being able to live in us humans. The reason it can't develop inside of us is because of our elevated body temperature, which basically creates like a barrier shielding us from this. As this scientist said, that's not a huge obstacle for the virus to overcome, meaning it could develop.